trying to find out slot and inside and outside. So
Washington Commanders sent their former first-round draft pick Jahan Dotson. The Philadelphia Eagles get back a third-round pick, 2 sevenths. They give up Dotson.
I don't know what it is with the Philadelphia Eagles, but they just have this knack for consistently pulling out these very shrewd trades out of nowhere. It's as if their general manager's actually all in on their team, and it seems like Howie Roseman just struck gold once again without really needing to give up much in return. So before we get to the content, I apologize if my surroundings are a little weird, if the camera quality's off. I'm currently traveling and I'm in Spain and it's hot as hell over here. Make sure you drop, like, subscribe, and turn on our notifications to help the channel grow. Now that we get all that out of the way, work! NFL season's finally here and PrizePicks is hooking us up fat with a brand new deal. New users that make a lineup of $5 get $50 guaranteed. All you have to do is go to the link in the description down below, download PrizePicks, create an account, and use my promo code Mikerophone to get $50 guaranteed when you make a lineup of $5 or more. I give away my picks each and every day on my Instagram account @TheFlightMike, and thank you PrizePicks for the sponsor. Mic check 1 2 1 2. What's going on, everybody? The 2022 NFL draft is already shaping up to be one of the best NFL drafts that we've seen in recent memory. At the top of the draft, you have Aiden Hutchinson, Derek Stingley Jr., and Sauce Gardner. And then following those first 4 picks, we saw a series of very talented wide receivers be selected. You have Drake London, who's shown that he could make big plays. He's never really had a good quarterback to throw him the football. You have Garrett Wilson, who has been able to carve out an incredible career for himself, despite having a revolving door at the quarterback position. And then you have Chris Olave, who's been doing really well for New Orleans, even though there's some questions of whether or not he truly gets along with Derek Carr. And recently he's been endorsing Spencer Rattler. You guys caught our last video. Chris Olave had this to say about him.
What are your early impressions from him?
He's real talented. That's the first thing I've seen from him. His arm talent is off the charts. He's a real natural feel out there. He's going to be real good. I want to see him in action, but from my first impression, he's going to be a real good player.
Then we have Jamison Williams, who had injuries to start out his career, but has carved out a very good role for the Detroit Lions as their wide receiver 2. Before we get to the number 16th pick in the NFL draft, the Washington Commanders selected Jahan Dotson from Penn State, and I remember when this pick was announced, I was absolutely livid. As a Cowboy fan, I was really hoping that we could get ourselves a solid wide receiver 2 at the time, and I felt like Jahan Dotson would be a solid complement to CeeDee Lamb. And when you take a look at his scouting report, it's easy to see why I'd feel this way. The man stood at 5 foot 10 inches, 178 pounds, ran a 4.43 40-yard dash, and the good things about him was the fact that he was an excellent route runner who understood how to tempo his routes to keep defenders off balance, consistently stays tight on his route breaks, and knows how to throttle down and stay friendly to the quarterback versus zone coverages. He's very good against the press, he has great hands and catching range, and knows how to use his size and length, and he was dangerous at each and every single level. He even had a knack for being a good punt returner. The bad news is the fact that he had a below average height and build, but that didn't stop Devontae Smith, so why would it affect Jahan Dotson? His pro comparison was Tyler Lockett, and it was easy to see why, so the Washington Commanders took him with the 16th overall pick in order to complement Terry McLaurin. And when you take a look at Jahan Dotson's rookie season, given the circumstances that he was placed in, he didn't perform poorly by any means. I mean, this was a Washington Commanders team that originally went out and traded for Carson Wentz, and then pivoted to Taylor Heineke, and then for some reason pivoted back to Carson Wentz despite Taylor Heineke being perfectly fine to play and outperforming Carson Wentz. Jahan Dotson had a pretty solid rookie season. No, it wasn't a record-breaking, earth-shattering rookie season, but he had 523 yards receiving in 12 games played and came down with 35 receptions, 7 of which were touchdowns. It was a solid rookie season, and he followed up the very next season when the Washington Commanders decided to promote Sam Howell to their quarterback. Jahan Dotson more or less had the same exact output, but there was only one problem. He played in way more games, came down with way more receptions, but also had slightly fewer yards and almost half as many touchdowns. So going into this season, I was very hopeful for Jahan Dotson to take the next step forward. How many times have you heard me say that whoever gets drafted by the Washington Commanders is very lucky because he's going to be able to throw the football to Terry McLaurin Gordon and Jahan Dotson and hand the football off to Austin Eckler. But it seems like the Commanders have a completely different philosophy at this point. Jahan Dotson was receiving a suspicious amount of snaps throughout the preseason, and typically whenever a wide receiver or any player gets that much volume in a preseason game, it's indicative of him being on the hot seat. And when Dan Quinn was asked about him throughout the preseason, Quinn said,
Yeah, I think we're right in the middle of that competition, at receiver and trying to find out slot and inside and outside. So moving guys into different locations, Ben, that's a big piece of it. And you'll see more of that this week as well with him and with some of the other receivers. We're really digging into that group, and it's a really competitive group to push it. So you'll see more of that same with his reps increased again this week.
Meaning that it didn't seem like brand new head coach Dan Quinn and new general manager Adam Peters were necessarily sold on Jahan Dotson as their slot receiver. And I've said this in videos before, it's not shocking to see a brand new head coach, a brand new front office come in and completely punt on old pieces that the previous regime spent a lot of capital to obtain. And it seems like that's exactly what the Washington Commanders felt about Jahan Dotson, because the Philadelphia Eagles would announce on their own Twitter page that we have agreed to terms on a trade with the Commanders for Jahan Dotson and a 5th round pick in the 2025 draft in exchange for a 3rd round pick and 2 7th round picks from the 2025 draft. And I know this isn't a blockbuster trade. This isn't like when your team goes out to get Tyreek Hill or anything that we'd see in March, but this is still a very significant trade. This is a player that was a 1st round pick 2 years ago that had a very difficult preseason, that was traded away to a division rival for not that much in return. If you're giving up on Jahan Dotson, receiving a 3rd round pick in return for him is fantastic. But at the same time, it just goes to show you how much the previous regime was a failure for the Washington Commanders. I mean, going back to 2022 when they selected Chase Young with the number 2 overall pick, only to trade him to the 49ers in 2023, and he's currently on his 3rd team. Jamin Davis recently changed his position just for the sake of extending his career. Jahan Dotson got traded to Philadelphia after 2 seasons, and now Emmanuel Forbes is fighting for a spot on the depth chart. Very brutal run for the Washington Commanders for sure. Apparently the Commanders were getting offers for Jahan Dotson in recent days per source. He played more than 30 snaps in the preseason opener, and Dan Quinn said ahead of the Miami game that the wide receiver 2 job was open. For the Commanders, what do I grade this trade? A C+. I mean, it's really hard to grade a trade like this because on one hand, new general manager Adam Peters and brand new head coach Dan Quinn has absolutely no attachment to a player of Dotson's caliber. It's a fresh, clean slate for the Commanders, and it's clear that they want to move on from him. I can't grade this any higher for the Commanders, and if anything, I think I graded this too high for the Commanders because you're giving up on a player that you invested a lot into for just a 3rd round pick, more or less. For the Philadelphia Eagles, man, I get so frustrated as a Cowboy fan just consistently watching the Eagles make excellent trade after excellent move after excellent move after excellent move. This team wins the offseason and typically dominates in the regular season and is without a doubt the favorite to win the NFC East this year. In free agency, they signed Saquon Barkley, and if healthy, he can without a doubt be the leading rusher in the NFL this year. They traded away Hassan Reddick, and they replaced Hassan Reddick with Bryce Huff, getting younger at the edge rusher position as well. But I'm a huge fan of when the Eagles make trades like this, whether it works out for them or not, and it doesn't always work out for them. Trading for Kevin Byard was a failure. Trading for Robert Quinn didn't necessarily pan out either. This team consistently takes very low risk, high reward swings, and I feel like this one could be the biggest one. I mean, Kellen Moore now has AJ Brown, Devontae Smith, and Jahan Dotson to orchestrate an offense around, along with Jalen Hurts and Saquon Barkley. The Philadelphia Eagles offense on paper sounds insane, and giving up a 3rd round pick and a couple 7s to get a player that was being selected number 16 overall 2 years ago as your wide receiver 3 is a no-brainer. I give the Eagles an A+ for this trade. Once again, I think it's an incredible trade that needs to be under the microscope a little bit more. So if you're a Philadelphia Eagles fan, let me know what you guys think about this trade in the comment section down below. Let me know if you agree with my trade grades or disagree with them in the comment section as well. And aside from that, I'm your boy Mike, and I'm dropping our mic until our next upload.